Right. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of Executive. And it is Thursday, the 12th of December. I'm Councillor Claire Douglas. I'm the leader of City of York Council. And this is one of the main decision-making bodies of the Council Executive Committee. And it is a chance for us to push forward with our council plan commitments to make York, excuse me everybody, to work hard in our communities to make our fantastic city a healthier, fairer, more affordable and more accessible place where everyone feels valued. So we will start off with the agenda. We first of all have apologies, and Councillor Eyre has apologised for this evening's meeting. We have Councillor Widdowson who is subbing for him, so welcome to the meeting, Councillor Widdowson. Next is declarations of interest. Does anybody have any declarations of interest? No declarations. Thank you, everyone. Item number 3 is the minutes of the meeting from the 14th of November. Can I see those who are in approval of those minutes, please? Thank you. Those are approved. And next we have public participation, and our list of public speakers starts with Councillor Coles. You have 3 minutes. Please come to the table. Would you like a 30-second warning? Off you go.
Thank you, Chair. And I just wanted to speak briefly in favour of the item on the agenda around the principles of the neighbourhood model. I was really pleased to see that this paper was coming to the executive, and what was particularly encouraging was that the paper sets out that the original purpose of that review was about identifying savings, but by looking at a proper analysis of duplication of services and contracts across directorates, working collaboratively across council teams, and ensuring that all teams are able to provide the best possible value for money. And I just thought that was a commendable approach that the council was taking, and that both officers and members of the executive should be commended for that approach. It's a really hard thing to do, I think, at the best of times, and I'm sure that it has been extremely challenging for the City of York as one of the lowest funded local authorities in the country following 14 years of budget cuts. But as the paper sets out, the population needs in the city are changing. The number of older people in the city is increasing exponentially, including doubling the numbers of people over the age of 85 over the next 15 years or so. I wanted to urge officers and the executive to keep looking at this and to keep looking upward and outward, which I think this approach does. I would urge the executive not to fall for any attempts from any other councillors on this or generally to revert backwards to a backward-looking conservative mindset that doesn't ever try to do things differently or better for the residents of the city. In particular, I think there's a really brilliant chance in this model to bring together health trainers, social prescribers, and our wonderful local area coordinators. I would like to see as many other services as possible joining in that approach, including housing officers, neighbourhood policing teams, schools, also being involved in a neighbourhood model. My plea to you all was to ensure that we have the right environment across the city to train the workforce that we need to better support this kind of model. Local area coordinators in particular are a unique breed of people. We've been fortunate enough in my ward to have 2 brilliant local area coordinators over the last few months. They are amazing people with amazing skills, particularly around relationships and communications with the community. They also have a biblical knowledge of the range of services and support that is available for people.
30 seconds left.
Thank you. I strongly believe that residents are better served by officers and the executive trying to make taxpayers' money go as far as possible, and I believe that that is what this approach does. Thank you to officers and exec members for all the work that you are doing to take us to this point. I hope that you're able to keep going with it. I think it's great, and I hope it gets your support this evening.
Thank you, Councillor Coles. We will take your very positive comments into account when we get to that agenda item, and thanks for joining us this evening. The next person that we have on the list of speakers is Nicholas Pleece, if you'd like to come to the table. And you have 3 minutes. Would you like me to give you a 30-second warning? Okay, thank you. Please go ahead.
So hello, I'm Nicholas Pleece. I'm a Professor of Housing and Society at the University of York. I'm Associate Dean for Research and Impact in the School of Business and Society at the University of York, and I'm a member of the European Observatory on Homelessness, which operates under the auspices of FIENSA, the European Federation of Homelessness Organisations. I'm here to speak in favour of the homelessness strategy. Just 3 broad points. The first one is that there is a very strong international evidence base in favour of a housing first approach, which is being proposed in the homelessness strategy. I've been directly involved in a lot of that analysis in terms of the Finnish successes in ending long-term homelessness as a major social problem. The second thing is that housing first is being rolled out successfully in the domestic setting, so it is being used successfully. The closest example of that is the Greater Manchester Combined Authority and the work that Andy Burnham is doing around developing housing first as a solution to homelessness in Manchester. And the third thing is to really just say that the university wants to support the process of ending homelessness in the city. We see it as part of our responsibility as an anchor institution within the city. We want to contribute towards ending homelessness and rough sleeping in York, and we're here to support that in any way we can. That's it.
Thank you very much, and thank you for coming this evening, and also thank you for your involvement in the creation of the strategy that we are going to consider later. So I'm sure we will see plenty more of you. Thank you very much. Next speaker that I have here is Andy Shrimpton, but I can't see that he's in the room. And he's not online, I don't think either, is he? He's not with us. Okay, thank you. Then we have Miss Anne Norton, who's going to speak on the local cycling walking infrastructure plan. Do we not have online? Oh, Anne Norton. Sorry? She's remote. Okay, thank you very much. Anne, can you hear us?
Hello, yes, can you hear
me?
me?
Thank you. We can hear you too. So you have
Lovely.
3 minutes. Would you like me to give you a 30-second warning?
No, thank you.
Okay, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I was the York Disability Rights Forum representative on the LC-WIP steering group. I would like to speak to my frustration with the process. This LC-WIP document being presented today has not been sent to, scrutinised by, or approved by the steering group. During the autumn of 2023, we provided comments on several iterations of the SISTRA document. This allowed me to comment on the specifics of language and phrasing on disability, as well as the broader points. Final comments were submitted last December with the expectation that the report would be published and a public consultation would take place in the new year of 2024. We also spent considerable time undertaking an in-depth study of how to improve the 4 key walking zones chosen by the steering group and assumed this work would also be published. The steering group heard nothing more until this November, when we were told the council have spent the last year producing this new revised document that is being submitted today. We had one 2-hour meeting to discuss maps and the general directional shift on the project. We did not receive the agenda till the morning of the meeting. We were told we would be given sight of this document before it was sent to executive. This has not happened. We were not even notified that the LC-WIP was going to executive today. I only discovered this on Saturday because a friend forwarded a message to me. This behaviour has been extremely discourteous, given the considerable amount of time and energy that I and others have given to this process. I will now comment on this LC-WIP document. Firstly, I would like to reiterate that active travel language is implicitly, if not explicitly, exclusionary for many disabled people. It assumes that movement is synonymous with exercise, as this document does on page 3. For many of us, what propels our wheelchair or scooter is the touch of a button and electricity. This means accepting that there are some people who cannot be active because their impairment prevents it, and a recognition that there are conditions for which exercise actively causes harm. Consideration of blue badge holders is noticeably absent. Removing parking spaces, page 22, was not discussed in the steering group meetings, and I would have objected to that as an aspiration. Walking, wheeling and cycling is active travel language. Disabled people do not like to be referred to as wheelers. The compromise of walking, wheelchair users, wheelers and cycling was suggested for the sister report. It is used inconsistently in this document. The language in the equality impact assessment around perceived risk is a denial of our lived experience and dismisses our concerns. I assume this document will be passed because the council is lagging far behind others in the country and needs to have an LC whip in place to secure funding. I think the way this process has been handled is shambolic, an example of how not to do community involvement and nowhere near co-production. I will certainly think twice before sacrificing my time and precious energy to a council committee again. I cannot endorse this document because, unlike the previous report, I have not had a chance to shape it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Norton, and we appreciate your comments and certainly will take those into consideration, and we'll get back to you on the points that you have raised. Thank you for joining us this evening. The final person I have on the list is Mr Chris Pollock, and I believe he's not the final person. I also have Andy Shrimpton in the room, but he can go last because he only just arrived. So, Chris, if you'd like to go ahead, you have 3 minutes. Would you like me to give you 30-second warning?
Yes, please, Chair.
Thank you. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Chris Pollock. I'm speaking on behalf of the York Civic Trust's Transport Advisory Group. The Civic Trust is encouraged by recent progress on transport planning for the city. It welcomed the adoption of the local transport strategy and the initial implementation plan. Transport strategy set out why a step change is required in transport within the city, with increasing the level of active travel playing an essential part in this change. And within policy focus area 2, which is improving walking, wheeling and cycling, and I quote, policies 2.2 and 2.5 commit to producing priority walking, wheeling and cycling networks. So this LCPIP, this plan makes a start on that process. Production of the LC whip is overdue. York is the only authority in Yorkshire, Humberside and the North East that does not have an adopted plan. It was stated at a recent meeting between the Trust and Active Travel England that York is failing on 2 counts, in not designing sufficiently high quality schemes and in not delivering on promised and funded projects. And as a result, York is much less likely to receive its full share of ATE funding, Other authorities, and Leeds was quoted, are now in a virtuous circle with higher quality designs and effective implementation attracting increasingly high levels of funding. Therefore, the Trust supports the LC whip as an enabler to unlock the funding on which York has been missing out. The Trust welcomes the commitment to deliver exemplar sustainable travel network, neighbourhood, radial active travel corridor and a sustainable travel village. Resources should be allocated immediately to identify these exemplars and work up realistic funding proposals, noting that some candidates are already funded. The LC whip steering group can assist with the governance of this process, and the Trust recommends that the steering group is retained and actively involved on an ongoing basis. The Trust urges the Council to proactively engage with Active Travel England in order to demonstrate the sea-changing commitment to active travel and identify funding streams that will deliver these exemplar projects. The plan refers to other planning documents, including a movement and place plan and a highway design guide. And whilst these documents have a clear role to play in the development of walking and cycling infrastructure in the city, the absence of adopted plans should not be used as an excuse for inaction on the exemplar projects. These exemplar projects should be progressed at pace.
You have 30 seconds.
Thank you, Chair. The Trust urges Executive to approve the tabled LC whip and urges the Executive Member for Transport to expedite implementation of the exemplar schemes. Thank you.
Many thanks, and thank you for your comments. They certainly will be taken into consideration and when we consider that item later in the agenda today. Thank you. And then finally, we have Andy Shrimpton from York Cycle Campaign, who also wants to talk on the LC whip. You have 3 minutes. Would you like 30-second warning? Okay, thank you. Please go ahead.
York Cycle Campaign welcomes the LC whip, albeit with some reservations. We do have some concerns we'd like to City of York Council to consider further. First of all, because this is a living document that will evolve, we believe that the steering group needs to continue and that the cycle campaign should be included as an active stakeholder in this. In addition, transparency is paramount. We'd like to see all current and future transport plans accessible on the council website, including all key elements such as project timeline, mode, budget, project lead, etc. This will enable all stakeholders to track all projects, scrutinise progress and provide the opportunity for their input on projects prior to delivery. Behavioural change is also more likely through shared and continued engagement with residents and key stakeholders. On LC Whip item 8, none of the detailed consultants' recommendations, which were subject to steering group input, are published, with no explanation in the report as to why a different approach has been used to draw up the office's proposals. As regards the priority list, there is no evidence of scoring underpinning this, nor is there an account of how, for example, top scoring cycle route over Lendal Bridge could be made up to the LTN 120 standard. We would very much like to see a 5-year strategy of measures that the council determines will achieve the target to double walking and cycling by 2030. This is much more likely to secure external funding than by making year-by-year incremental decisions as funding is released. With this in mind, we recommend starting with projects noted as high for cycling and that already have detailed designs or feasibility studies, such as the Acombe Road Holgate City Centre route and the A19 Booth and Shipton Road route. The report also identifies key general measures that we agree with and would wholeheartedly support, such as the reallocation of on-street parking and loading permissions on radial routes to prioritise safe cycling routes, continuous crossing of side roads and maintenance of vegetation management along these cycle routes. We'd also welcome emphasis on healthier streets and neighbourhoods as well as school streets. Finally, we'd like to state that as a campaign, we've been working with the City of York Council and wish to continue this partnership so both parties can achieve tangible results that will improve cycling infrastructure and increase the number of residents cycling around the city. Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks for those comments, and they'll certainly be taken into consideration. And I'm sure we will continue to work with you over the coming years on this project. Thank you very much to everybody who's been involved in the LC Whip creation. Right, thank you very much, everybody. So next item is item 5 is the forward plan. Can I see those who are in approval of the forward plan? Thank you. So that's approved unanimously. And then item 6 is the homelessness and rough sleeper strategy 2024 to 2029. And we have Sarah Story and Pauline Stutchfield here, who are our directors in housing and corporate director of adult social care and integration. I got that title right tonight, didn't I? We have Dennis Southall, who is head of housing, and Andrew Bebbington, who, if you put your name tag this side, I can see what housing policy officer. Fantastic. Thank you very much. So who's going to start here? Sarah, please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you so much for considering this paper today. It's been a real pleasure actually to be involved in the work around developing the homelessness and rough sleeper strategy. And I want to say thank you to all of the colleagues internally and externally who've helped us to do this work. In particular, you heard from Professor Police earlier, Professor Police and others who've joined our executive strategic steering group, which I've been chairing, but also we've had really fantastic engagement at the sessions that Andrew and others have set up. From a very wide range of partners to hear their views, their expertise, and most of all their passion and enthusiasm and commitment to making homelessness rare, brief and non-recurring. And it's that sort of commitment that we really need, and in particular that multidisciplinary response that's going to be so important to actually making the actions in this strategy happen. So I'm going to hand over to Pauline now to say a little bit more about the strategy itself. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know how to quite follow that. That was excellent. Thank you. So the statutory background to this is that under the Homelessness Act 2002, all housing authorities must have in place a homelessness strategy based on a review of all forms of homelessness in their district. The strategy must be renewed every 5 years, so hence the period that we're talking about. And why the proposals in this report are very strategic and long-term. And it aims to make homelessness, as Sarah said, rare, brief and non-recurring. And we will do that by continuing to transform the way we work with people on their journey to having their own tenancy. And I say continuing because we've already started to use housing first approaches in our work so far. So what is housing first? Housing first is an approach to ending homelessness through housing and support provision at the same time. It prioritises access to permanent housing with tailored, open-ended wraparound support for the resident that emphasises their own choice and control. The existing of the neighbourhood approach covered in the next report on the agenda today will support that housing first approach, and we're very pleased to bring both of those reports today. The intensive support is free from conditions, and that's really important. We're not asking people to be free from whatever the complex needs that they come with, but are supported with those needs. So apart from the willingness to sustain a tenancy, individuals are not required to be housing ready before moving into their home. Rather, the secure housing is a stable platform from which they can address other issues. The strategy allows for a rapid rehousing for those people and families who are ready to manage a tenancy straight away without support. But it also allows us to focus on those people, as I said, with histories of repeat homelessness and very complex needs, and for whom other services have not been so far successful in ending their homelessness. Strong evidence and research, as you heard from Professor Please, shows that the model helps these people to secure housing earlier and helps them make improvements to their health, well-being and social and economic integration. And so executive are asked to approve the recommendations in this report. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Dennis, Andrew, do you want to add anything at this point? Please do go ahead if you would like to.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd echo the pleasant experience that this has been getting to this point. The consultation sessions were really, really positive, but challenging at the same time. And it was really reassuring to see the passion that some of the partners and services and members of the public that we work with were really behind this approach that we were advocating in this document, and essentially want to see us work to ensure that people, if they get anywhere near homelessness, have an experience that is outlined in the document, rare, brief, etc. So yeah, just to echo those things, the evidence is there to back up the approach that we're taking. There are lots of really good examples around that. It builds on the successes of the services that we've had in place for quite a few years now. So it's an extension of building on, hopefully an acceleration of what we've been doing, and with partners all pulling in the same direction. I think it's beneficial for the people, beneficial for those involved in providing those services, and I think overall it will save the city some money as well, which is never a bad thing, let's face it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dennis. I really appreciate it. So who would like to speak on this item then? Okay, thank you. So would you like to go ahead then, Councillor Pavlovic?
Thank you, Chair, and you don't have to start with, can you make it brief? But I do need to say one or two things. Without making it sound too much like an Oscar acceptance speech, I would like to thank all those people who've been so instrumental in bringing this forward. You can see from the front of the report, there are 4 co-authors of this report. For the first time, we've got the Director of Communities and Housing, we've got the Corporate Director of Adult Social Care, we've got the Corporate Director of Children and Families, and we've got the Director of Public Health, all contributing to this. And the officers that have done the work and the consultation and the writing within the housing team, I couldn't be more grateful to them. I'd also like to thank Professor Pleece, who has been a massive influence on me. We are so lucky in this city to have one of the world's foremost experts on homelessness, and with his team, Dr. Brotherton, Dr. Blood, and their willingness to give their time and the university to allow them to contribute their time for nothing in developing this strategy has been amazing. But most of all, and they're outlined on page 23, the list of the partners who contributed to the consultations, who give us their feedback. Most of all, I would like to thank all of those organisations working with homeless people, and those with experience of rough sleeping themselves, to give their time and to give their support to this approach is absolutely fantastic. And one of the questions that I would have asked Dennis or Professor Pleece, but you can't do that in public participation, is we've seen the evidence in York of how taking a housing first, person-centred approach using a range of agencies makes a difference, much more than we're able to do currently with the existing models that we've been trying for 30 years, and we still see homelessness, and we still see rough sleeping on our streets every day, and the numbers are going up. They're not just going up in York, they're going up nationally. Last year, they went up by 18% alone, according to Shelter. So we have to do something, and we've seen that Housing First works. You've heard from Professor Pleece that Finland and Greater Manchester have made massive strides in reducing their homeless numbers. This is going to be a challenge. If it was dead easy, we would have ended homelessness nationally by now. But it isn't. We haven't got enough social housing stock. And I'm so grateful to those registered providers that have allowed us to use their flats and homes for Housing First. But to have the rapid housing for those people who need less support to be able to sustain a tenancy is a significant move forward. We've been doing it on a small piecemeal basis. This is going to move that up more than a notch. But those people that we see failing in the existing systems that operate throughout the country, but in York as well, by changing that approach to say we will put you at the heart of what of our approach, rather than this is what we've got, fit in. And this is not rigged, but I got an email just today from somebody whose parents were saying their child has failed hostel time and time again. And they're repeatedly back on the streets with a range of health problems. Is there something like Housing First? Not knowing that we already deliver Housing First and making every adult matter. But for those people that won't suit a hostile environment, this approach will really make a significant difference. So I massively commend it to you. I've kept it as brief as I could. I could talk for another 20 minutes. I've spent 30 years of my life working with homeless people, and I genuinely think this will make a significant difference.
Thank you. Oh, sorry, you didn't indicate at the point when I asked earlier. Well, please go ahead if you keep it brief, but the way that we run the meeting is that when I ask for people to indicate if they want to speak, then we do it at the beginning of an item so that I can plan who is going to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Liberal Democrats welcome the hard work that the officers and the executive members for housing has put into this strategy. The executive member is deeply committed to trying to end homelessness in York, and that should be commended. However, this strategy has some flaws and potential unintended consequences that cannot be ignored. We are concerned about the level of resource going into buying up one-bedroom flats to solve the issue of homelessness, and the lack of attention in the report to building a strategy that would support the integration of vulnerable residents into neighbourhoods. Over the last 18 months, the council's estate management function has been severely stretched in some areas of the city. Therefore, we are seeking assurances that existing residents and those that moved in will be supported. At the same time, there are many individuals currently on the council housing waiting list who would be very interested in living in one-bedroom apartments that the council is seeking to acquire. We are concerned that the strategy as currently written could disadvantage those residents and make it even more difficult for them to find a home. I'm sure we all want to avoid this situation where somebody sees becoming homeless as the only practical way to secure a social rent on a one-bedroom flat in York. Further, some of the accommodation planned for Coney Street could potentially be used to accommodate homeless people within the city centre with access to services and support. It's not clear in the report if this is being considered or if it's one of the range of measures. And finally, could the executive confirm that all the homes built on the council land, i.e. the Holland and Barrett house, building that has been sold, is going to be 100% affordable? Apologies if I needed to say that earlier. I will put my hand up first time.
Yeah, and I did ask you and you didn't indicate, but you have spoken now. Officers, would anybody like to come back on the one-bed flat element for just on technical aspects of what Councillor Widdowson said, and then Councillor Pavlovic will answer some of the others.
Yeah, so that I think it's acknowledged in the report that there's a severe need for all types of property, and that's absolutely right. What we're talking about doing is developing a strategic approach to purchasing over and above, so that we accommodate as far as is possible all of those needs, including housing first, rapid rehousing. In addition to that, there will be an awful lot of prevention work. And let's not forget that many of the people coming through the services will end up in those properties anyway. What will happen is that they will get to the place that they need to be sooner and have the right support around them.
Thank you, Dennis, for that. And I would just like to say something before Councillor Pavlovic comes in. I have to say that I find it rather frustrating that we have to keep explaining to you and your colleagues about what the 100% affordable on council-owned housing allocated land really means. Holland and Barrett was a council-owned asset, but it wasn't allocated to housing. So we have no commitment there to put 100% affordable housing on it. And I'm sure that Councillor Pavlovic or numerous officers would be happy to explain that concept again if it's still not understood fully. Councillor Pavlovic, would you like to come back at all? Thank you.
Thank you. And I just want to start by saying homeless people are not a distinct entity. They are also on the housing waiting list. They are human beings that deserve our support in the same way that everybody else on the housing waiting list does. So yes, we are taking people off the streets. Yes, we are taking them out of the hostels and giving them independence and giving them a chance to develop independent, safe, healthy lives. And I make no apologies for that. But the whole point of how will that impact on their neighbours? That's if you like, that's the nutshell of what we're trying to do. To say that what existed at the moment wasn't that wraparound support. It didn't exist in the way that this will exist. You know, so by having health, by having communities, by having substance misuse, by having mental health support available as part of one package, not 7 different packages, that's the difference that this approach is taking. And as for Coney Street, I will just the Coney Street development is not a council development. It's a private development. It's gone through planning on the terms that it's gone through planning. And the viability, those of you, and I suspect you were on that committee that considered it, looked at the viability assessment for affordable housing. So it's not our development, and we're not able to influence beyond the viability assessment and the section 106 what they do with it.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Pavlovic, and I think most people in this room understand that, so thanks for clarifying it. And I would just like to say before we move on, we spoke earlier, or I started the meeting by outlining what we are aiming to do in York as the Labour administration. And this is a prime example of making our city a healthier, fairer, and a city and a place where everyone feels valued. And I think this is a great step forward on that. So thanks to everybody who's been involved. And on that, I will take us to the recommendations that are on page 20. There are paragraphs 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 and 21. And if I start at the top, because there are quite a lot, but they are really important. So we have paragraph 16, we're going to approve the homelessness and rough sleeper strategy for 24 to 29, as described in the report, and delegate to the Director of Housing and Communities for the final form of the draft strategy document, which is the Annex E, in consultation with the Executive Member for Housing, Planning and Safer Communities, to get on with the implementation of that. B, at paragraph 17, establish a multi-agency governance board to help guide the strategy implementation. Authorise the Director of Housing and Communities and the Corporate Director of Adult Social Care and Integration to work with partners on service redesign and service transformation, moving to a housing first approach. D, authorise Director of Housing and Communities to work with partners to increase the supply of suitable accommodation to help meet demand. E, authorise the Director of Housing and Communities and the Corporate Director of Adult Social Care and Integration to develop a preventative approach and services in line with the strategy and the year 1 actions detailed in this report. And then finally, F is to report back to Executive Committee within 12 months on progress against delivery of the strategy action plan. So please, can I see those who are in favour of those recommendations? Thank you, everybody. So that is approved. And I would really like to thank everybody who has had any part in this, small or large. And I know that it has been a really long time investment and energy, and bringing all the partners together to fully understand the challenge that we have around homelessness in the city, and to develop a model that will, as we hope, mean that it happens rarely and for short periods of time when it does, and infrequently. So thank you, everybody. And please, as I often say, go forth and implement. Thank you. Yeah, thanks. Well done. Item number 7 is the design principles of a neighbourhood model for York. And Pauline Stutchfield is staying with us for this item, and we have Laura Williams who's joining us as well. So are you, oh yeah, name tag, very good. Right, thank you very much. Pauline, do you want to start? Thank you, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Before I summarise the report, I'd just like to point out that if you look at the authors at the end of the report, we've not reflected this at the beginning, that actually this again is a joint piece of work, particularly with health, not just public health. Colleagues can't be here today, but also with the place director and also with primary care. And I now, as a result of this work, I now jointly chair the Health and Care Collaborative in York, and Laura Williams, Assistant Director, has been working very closely with the researchers at is it York University? It is, isn't it? With, again, primary care colleagues and public health on the work that underpins this strategy. So this is very much across council and cross public sector approach. And as Councillor Coles mentioned at the beginning, we'll be working very closely with education and schools and the police. We've started initial conversations with them. Laura started those conversations, and we hope for that to grow. And they're very, very interested in the 4 area models to start to plan community policing in the future. So in terms of the report itself, the report asks Executive to approve the design principles which will underpin the work to develop the York neighbourhood model, including the establishment of 4 neighbourhoods agreed jointly with Health. I think that's important to say. This was co-produced. And I hope after today we're not talking about a model. We are talking about York neighbourhoods. Neighbourhood working is a journey which needs to evolve from good practice already happening across the city. This is not about implementing structural change, which forces a shift in behaviour and working practices, but about enabling the multi-agency workforce to collaborate, share knowledge and work together, focusing on the people and families within the communities they serve. In response to local need and a data-led approach, it provides multidisciplinary prevention and early intervention work at the earliest and most local level. All partners will know their residents and know each other within a network of support. Members of our executive are asked to approve the report and to approve a further update report by June 2024 on the implementation of the model. And to move away from the theory, Laura is going to talk about how this works in practice elsewhere and the benefits for all involved, and most importantly, in relation to residents' health, well-being and quality of life.
Thanks. So if it's okay, I'm going to just quickly use an example where another local authority and health partners have moved into an integrated neighbourhood team way of working, just to kind of illustrate the impact the type of system change can have on an actual individual. So this is Mary's story. It's been anonymised for her privacy and shared with her consent. So at the start of her story, a drug and alcohol recovery worker and a GP were supporting Mary. She lives with the impact of many years of trauma and adverse experiences. She's addicted to cocaine, and 2 of her 3 children have been taken into care. She's got significant financial and housing challenges and states that she no longer trusts professionals. She was presented in crisis to various healthcare settings, calling multiple ambulances a week, and was often being picked up by the police. So it was truly across systems. So the process starts in this local authority with a what matters to you conversation to decide on what's important to the individual, and importantly, identifying their strengths and on what the caseworkers can build on. Professionals then came together to pull in a wide range of support services tailored to her needs. So some examples were arranging community transport so she could maintain access with her 2 children who were still in care, housing, fixing her boiler to make sure she had heating and hot water over winter, and the community hub provided her with blankets, heated blankets, while she waited for the plumber to arrive. A company was hired in to support her with house clearing and cleaning to create a safer environment for her and the child who was still living at home. She was provided with a new coat from a small grant scheme, which sounds really small, but it was full of holes and she was embarrassed to go out and interact with other people. And as a result of that, she then started to access local activities and become involved in volunteering opportunities that gave her a new sense of purpose, in her words. She was given a health check and a meds review. So 3 months later, Mary had stopped using cocaine. She was paying her rent and seeing her housing officer fortnightly, which was a huge change to help her maintain her tenancy and address any issues. She's been maintaining the home and creating opportunities to spend more quality time with the older son who remained at home. And really crucially, she hadn't presented at A&E or called an ambulance since her first meeting with the hub. So this creativity and flexibility was unlocked by empowering professionals on the ground to make decisions at the lowest possible level and to access small budgets, which is just vitally important to kind of remove some of that bureaucracy. And as Councillor Coles touched upon, anyone who's already worked with our local area coordinators, with our social prescribers, will already know we've already got staff in the city that are working in this kind of way. They put relationships at the centre of everything they do, and they focus on a person's strengths and not just the challenges that they're facing at that time. So this model intends to build on that success, to embed that way of working across systems in the city, and to ensure that we're offering at the right time, in the right place, and putting people and relationships at the heart of everything that we do.
Thank you. Fantastic. Who would like to speak on this item then, please? All right, well, Councillor Widdowson, please go ahead in that case.
Thank you. Thank you for the report and all the hard work that's gone into it. On the face of the report, it seems that everything is going well. However, this report masks what's actually happening in our city. Local area coordinators are the heart of this strategy. And due to the budget approved by this Labour administration earlier this year, we've seen the capacity of the local area coordinators reduced. How can the executive claim that they are living up to their each principles when they are removing local area coordinator resources from the most deprived ward, being Westfield? To quote Councillor Coles, local area coordinators are a particular breed that have a biblical knowledge of resources. So running that service down any further will undermine the entire strategy. There has been a decoupling exercise in this paper to try to bury the cuts that have been made. It tells a positive story about the services that have been left, but there is no mention of the 591,000 taken from early intervention, nor the 600,000 vacancy management savings. The strategy attempts to present the benefits of a holistic approach, but with a backdrop of the council's estate management function being stretched to breaking point. This paper presents a picture that does not exist for many residents in York. Finally, on page 137, the shoehorning of neighbourhood caretakers into this report with no details of the proposals is odd. Will every area in York get a recruited neighbourhood caretaker that will trim verges and hedges and clear up litter and fill potholes, as Councillor Douglas promised in the York Press on the 12th of May 2023 when you were elected? Or is this a renaming along the lines of 1984?
Right, I think for a start we need to correct a misconception again, don't we? We seem to have a theme here that is, please go ahead, Councillor Pavlovic.
Thank you. I'll start by I'll start by thanking the officers. The officers have done a fantastic work again across council, and that's as we've talked in previous executive meetings, including the last one, where Councillor Eyre was very complimentary, is the change in approach of this administration to previous administrations that say we deliver better for our people when we work together. And the work that the officers have done has been absolutely exemplary. From what started out as a germ of an idea to become this, that despite the naysaying from across the table, actually was discussed and was supported by her colleagues, and cross-party colleagues. Actually, I would go on to say, but you know, that's the nature of tribal politics. You've got to find some way to rubbish something, even when you actually support it in a different meeting. But there you go. But just to correct the error in the earlier comments, the local area coordinators haven't been cut. A local area coordinator left to take a different job. There is a vacancy. Westfield had 2 local area coordinators and Huntington had 0. But certain councillors would rather keep their 2 and let another area have 0. So it was a reallocation of resources. But as I say, you know, it's the nature of things. So what are we doing? We're delivering on the council plan. This is another example of how we're delivering on the council plan. It's the logical next step in transforming our community services, building on the strong foundations of the hubs that already exist, and whether that in communities, in families, and frailty and mental health hubs. And we talked about mental health hubs, if you recall, at the last meeting. And this will allow teams across health, social care, housing, public realm, to be the eyes and ears, to be those early interventions that currently they're not as effective as they could be. We will bring them together, and local area coordinators are a very integral part of that, but so are housing officers. So are officers in public realm, so are the social care workers and the children's care workers. And really importantly, and Pauline mentioned it, and I must thank them, the ICB, who've got GPs supporting this initiative. So, you know, all these agencies can't all be wrong, though apparently they can. We will deliver. We've said we will deliver, and it will go back to scrutiny, because I actually believe in scrutiny, and I welcomed the cross-party support for this initiative, and we'll continue to work across party to ensure that the detail, these are the design principles, the detail that comes to us in the summer is something that perhaps will get supported by everybody, but we'll see.
Thank you, Councillor Pavlovic. And I'd just like to add something as well, given that I sit on the York Place Board, the York Health and Care Partnership, which is bringing together of council officers and representatives, and also the health partners across the city and the voluntary sector too. And this has been very extensively discussed there and promoted and worked on together. And I have to say that York Health and Care Partnership is working really, really successfully together. Ian is the chair of that, and Sarah Compton-Lovell, the director of York Place, unfortunately couldn't be with us this evening to speak about that. But I know that, as you say, Councillor Pavlovic, she's really happy with how this is moving forward, as are partners across the city. So we're looking forward to taking advantage of what this change in ways of working and the neighbourhood model gives us the opportunity to do in other parts of the council, and that is why the neighbourhood caretakers were mentioned, and also transport as well, because it all needs to fit together in one holistic view rather than inefficient working, which is unfortunately what we cannot afford anymore in local authorities, given our resource that's available to us and the rising demand and need of our communities. So this is a very positive move forward, and yet again, as you said, is delivering on the council plans. So I'd like to thank everybody that's been involved, because I know there's been a huge amount of very positive work that will bear a lot of fruit in numerous ways over the coming years. So on that happy note, we are going to move to the recommendations that are on page 139 at paragraph 21. And I just also on this one like to draw everybody's attention to the options that were outlined on page 150 of the agenda pack. And so option 1 is basically outlined in paragraphs 21A, B and C, and that is to move ahead in collaboration with health partners on this project. So at 21A, we have note the work undertaking so far on the neighbourhood model and prove the 4-area model developed in conjunction with health partners. B, approve the design principles contained in Annex A. And C, approve officers undertaking further engagement and co-production on the model, applying the approved design principles throughout with an aim to have detailed CYC neighbourhood proposals back to executive by summer 2025 with building blocks in place for delivery. So can I see those who are in favour of that, please? Thank you. Right, so that is approved, and thank you for everything that you've done. Please give our thanks to other officers as well that have worked so hard and so constructively on this, and we look forward to continuing that development. Thank you, everybody. Right, item 8 is our local cycling and walking infrastructure plan. So we have Tom Horn here to introduce this paper to us. Thank you for joining us this evening, Tom. Is there a name tag there for you? Perhaps not. Oh, right at the bottom. There we go. Thank you. Sorry, Tom Horner. I missed off the end of that. Apologies. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. So this report presents the local cycling and walking infrastructure plan. This is a term used by the Department for Transport. In York, it's obviously extremely important that our transport infrastructure is accessible for all. So for us, we've defined it as walking, wheelchair users, wheeling and cycling, including cycles used as mobility aids. And I apologise to Anne for not fully checking that through the entire document. We will revise that and make sure that's written right through. So an LSWIP, as it's called in transport planning jargon, is a crucial document to outline prioritised areas and routes for improvement. It isn't there to present designs at this stage. That becomes important at the later stage when we're actually starting to work with communities and develop projects themselves. So this is just about identifying the key areas for investment and where we need to prioritise our attention and trying to attract funding into. So the walking, wheelchair user and wheeling zones, they've been defined based on a range of key destinations and their immediate catchment areas. They've been prioritised in 3 ways across central, suburban and village tiers, so that we're ensuring that we're comparing like by like as far as possible. If you take a city centre area, there's obviously more destinations there than there might be in a village, and we want to ensure that all communities across York have access to the funding that we can potentially draw down through this. The cycle routes have been defined using extensive evidence as well. There's Department for Transport propensity to cycle tool and census data, transport movements, requests for improvement, whole host of things have fed into that, and we've developed 2-tier networks there for strategic cycle routes where we expect the maximum uptake from cycling and from a local cycle network which will feed those strategic routes and enable people to get from the front door to the strategic bigger routes. So a couple of other key things just to finish up. The LSWIP is an important living document, so we can update and adapt this as we go, as policies change or as different funding opportunities arise. The key thing we've focused on, and I don't make, it's been alluded to, and I don't make any apology for revising the approach to this, but the key thing we've done when inherited this in the summer, there were 4 core walking zones, and by concentrating your walking zones into the central areas as they were previously, we were restricting the amount of money we could potentially draw down. So the recently approved local transport strategy implementation plan contains aspirations around creating sustainable neighbourhoods and villages. So we've undertaken extensive work that York Access Forum were approved of when the measures were presented to them in November at a specific meeting, to ensure that all these communities across York can draw down on the funding. So, for instance, if we had just 4 walk zones in central York, we would be able to draw down money for Acomb, for Rawcliffe, to get accessibility improvements in those areas. So that's why we've changed the approach, and we believe we've made it far more comprehensive, and it gives us a much more stronger mesh of a network to be able to work with Active Travel England, Department for Transport, the Mayoral Combined Authority, to try and bring more infrastructure funding into York. So in terms of the steering group, this summary document has been a little bit rushed. I'll hold my hands up to that. And in hindsight, we would have probably published the background paper, because that contains a lot of the detail. So whenever we're putting the documents online, and when they're in the more refined versions for bidding, we'll fully ensure that all the supporting documents are written out there. The steering group are putting a lot of valuable work. I'd really like to thank them. The comments have been embedded absolutely into the background document. The design work that they undertook is in there, and I gave my assurances at the last steering group that we will use that as the foundation for any future work on those projects. The key reason for shifting approach was purely to ensure that York's in a better position to deliver more work on the ground that helps our communities. So that's why, and I apologise if I haven't communicated that well enough to steering group members.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you for showing so much consideration of the comments that Anne made at the beginning of the meeting. It's really important, and we really appreciate that. Thank you. Right, who would like to speak on this item then, please? Right, Councillor Kilbane, would you like to go ahead first? Then, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll be very brief, because I wasn't planning on speaking, but I feel as the previous transport exec that the previous LC whip was getting developed under, I just wanted to put on record our thanks to the steering group. I'm sorry that Anne Norton feels as though she's been stumped. I can understand why. I would like to apologise as the executive member that was responsible at the time that she was working on it. I've got to say, when we took over this LC whip following the previous administration, I think it was a real dog's dinner. And I think the reason for that is that the scope that they'd been set by the executive member just wasn't clear, wasn't focused, and wasn't in the right place. And the steering group did a really, really good job, I think, having been given quite a poor steer. And what we inherited was an LC whip that, quite frankly, the Liberal Democrats had given to the Greens to play with, without ever really taking it seriously, just like they did with every other transport initiative that we saw under the previous administration. It's great to be part of an administration that has picked up the challenge of transport. It's a difficult one, but it is one that we don't shy from, and we're getting on with delivering. And I would just like to thank Tom for all the work that him and his team has done, and the responsibility for any misunderstandings, I think, with the previous iterations lie with myself, Tom, and I don't think you have anything to apologise for.
Thank you for that, Councillor Kilbane. Councillor Widdowson, please go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. The Lib Dems are pleased to see the work on the local cycling and walking infrastructure plan coming to fruition after its development was kicked off by the previous administration. As with everything, everything can always be improved. It's good to see that this work has been very much driven by data, by input from experts in the field, by feedback from scrutiny, and by the lived experience of those who use York's walking, wheelchairing, wheelchairing and cycling networks, or would like to use them. I hope that the plan will be kept under review, which you've said it will be, and that it can be used to support regional and national bids for funding to invest in measures to make walking, wheeling, wheelchairing and cycling a safer and more attractive option for more people. Obviously, it won't be possible to fund the delivery of all the improvements at once, and so expectations will need to be managed. So following on from Councillor Douglas's comments in this meeting, I do hope that Councillor Ravilius will reflect on her politicking that went on before the 23 local election campaign, when, for example, certain campaign groups encouraged residents to believe that £4 million worth of funding had been pulled from an active travel scheme for Acombe Road, and when that funding didn't actually exist. Hopefully, going forward, we can all do better than that.
I'm not sure that any of us know what you're talking about, quite frankly. So, Councillor Ravilius, would you like to? Councillor Ravilius, would you like to?
Cycling group.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to express a huge thanks to Tom and his team. They've put in a massive amount of work to turn this LC whip around and to create something that's really strategic. It's holistic for the whole city, and it's going to give us the greatest chance of getting the much needed funding to do the changes we desperately need to do. I was sorry to hear from Anne about the experience that she's had in terms of the engagement and being part of the steering group, and her frustration and the feeling of lack of opportunity to feedback. And yeah, I take that on my shoulders as well, because we had a job of, we created a new transport strategy which got published this summer, and this LC whip had to be aligned with that strategy. And as Tom has explained, it also had to give us the greatest chance of getting the funding that we need to bring in. So we had to do that holistic big rethink. And it does mean we also had an urgency to get this LC whip out and done so that we can get on with getting that funding. So it has been more rushed than we might have wanted it to be, and we haven't perhaps been able to engage with the steering group as closely as we would have liked. The good thing about this document is it's a living document, and that means we can continue to revise it, to get the language right, to take on board the feedback, and to update things as we progress. We can tick bits off that map and say done. So that's really, you know, we've got that strategy now in place, and it's really exciting. So I think this is a brilliant step to go and approve this document. It puts us in a very strong position for the funding, and that position to negotiate with developers when we've got new developments coming along, and we can say, look, here's the need. We've mapped it out. We've shown where that need is. We can see that York's active travel infrastructure has been declining over the last decade or so, and that's reflected in the fall that we've seen in the number of people cycling in the city. And we can also see that our roads are absolutely jammed with traffic, and people have told us in our public consultation that they don't feel safe walking, wheeling, wheelchair using or cycling. It just feels too crowded and too dangerous. So we recognise that need to prioritise and sustain active travel and support people to be able to choose to walk, use a wheelchair, cycle, and wheel. So all of those modes of transport. This document gives us the evidence-based approach to start that task of improving. And we can't do it all at once. We won't have the funding to do it all at once. But the great thing here is that it helps us prioritise where we're going to see the greatest benefits. So we've got 65 walking zones and 68 active travel routes that we can start looking at, and bring them up to a high standard over time that will enable people to choose that mode of travel. It'll also inform our highway maintenance and improvement programme. So it enables officers to start directing resources into repairing and improving pavements and cycle network, and creating that safe and accessible and really reliable routes that get people going. It will inform which schemes we prioritise in our implementation plan, and it'll just get us going on securing that funding. So this is very much a living document, and I'm really looking forward to seeing where we go with it and what we're going to work on first. And we are already looking at how we choose a sustainable neighbourhood and a sustainable village, and do some pilot areas that really demonstrate what York can be. So York's a perfect city in theory for walking, wheeling, wheelchair using and cycling. It's flat, the weather's not too bad most of the time, and we're a compact city where everything's within easy reach. So this LC Whip maps out the changes that we need to do, and now it's up to us to get on with doing them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ravilius. And yeah, I echo your very positive outlook and reflection on that and vision for what the city can be. And I have to say, with the working together with the officers and our communities and our organisations who've provided so much time and expertise over the past months, of 18 months or so, really have seen step change in our approach to transport and the ambition, which is absolutely fantastic. And the city is really valuing that as well. I get people that mention it to me regularly. Right then, so our recommendations are on page, where am I? 191, and they are at paragraph 9. Point 1 and 2 there. So executive is asked to approve the LC Whip as detailed in Annex A. And point 2 is to delegate authority to the executive member for transport to review and make changes to the LC Whip in accordance with any approved local transport strategy or plan as required. And that is in response to the fact that this is a living document as outlined earlier. So can I see those who are in favour of the recommendations? Thank you, everybody. So that's approved unanimously. We now finally have an LC Whip, and thank you, Tom, for all your work on it. We really appreciate it. Thank your colleagues as necessary, and now we can go off and bring the money in, can't we?
Anyway, that's how it works out now. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Pass the thanks on to colleagues.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, going back to the agenda, then we, under item 9, have urgent business. I've not been notified of any urgent business, so that is the end of the meeting. And I'd like to thank everybody for pushing our ambitions on further in York and attending this evening, whether you're either at the table or in the audience. So thank you very much, and we will see you again soon. That's the end of the meeting.